atunci.
Thank you very much, and I'll read the English. Now this is from the book of Perilous Dishes, and it's set in very late 18th century, 1798 in Bucharest, and the story is told in several voices, and this is the voice of the cook, and the cook has created this book of recipes. In fact, you may even have recipe cards on your chairs from this very special book of Perilous Dishes. And it's been translated by James Brown. My words will never be seen by anyone, for they are not for eyes. They are just in my mind and in Satua's, and maybe for the ears of a Pole who will live for 200 years. One day he will write on paper all that wanders through my mind, and his book will pass from hand to hand for centuries. Many will call it the story of the cook, but even more will read it as a fairy tale. And all this will happen only if I am not impelled by the great Satur to pour it into some other ear. My story begins with a leek broth that I had made just for myself. What evenings there were back then, especially that evening when the earth was still thronged with the memory of the snow, and into Our Lady's palace came the great Mihalachi Albu, a man so grand his like had never been seen in the Greciananu neighbourhood, or heard of by anyone in all Bucharest, grand as Bucharest might be, and the very navel of the earth. They said his dad had sold gypsies like me, hundreds or maybe hundreds of linguari, of rudari, and what other poor wretches were for sale, and so accumulated piles of money, hence the wealth of Mihalachi, who bought for himself palaces, carriages, and the rank of Vornik. And this extraordinary man, who went about in carriages, the like of which no one had ever seen, met his death in his wedding bed, on that evening on which I had made a beautiful leek broth, and the last mists of winter were rising from the earth below the kitchen windows. Out of all the skirts in Bucharest, out of all the bosoms that had been thrust under his nose, out of all the females that spread around them the warm smell of desire, Mihalachi picked out Caterina Grecianu, my mistress, who wasn't to be compared with any of the bits of stuff in the city. And it was a wedding, as that old cupping glass woman used to say, with princesses and princes. I cooked 16 dishes, nothing but the best. Steak soaked in wine, thin sauces, salads, and about 20 baskets of little donuts, cut to shape with a plum brandy glass, just the right size to take in a single bite. And after 3 days of partying and dancing, when all the wedding guests were flat out and the bride and groom had gone to bed, I went into the kitchen, which the servants had left spotless. And among the silent pot lids and to the sound of the snoring sleepers, I made myself a leek broth. Because you ought to know, when I cook, I don't taste anything. I don't touch the food, because cooking isn't a job. It's a delicate way of consecrating your stomach. If I tasted something, immediately a feeling of disgust would come over me, and I wouldn't be able to stir anything else with a spoon. But after it's all over, especially once the place is cleaned up, I make 2 spoonfuls of broth just for my soul, especially with arachi, to take away the sickening feeling, with nettles, to enhance my taste for cooking, or above all, with goosefoot, or maybe goose fat, after which I always fall asleep with my eyes open. That evening I was worn out, but also happy, because it wasn't every day that I could make those pies, but I didn't manage to fall asleep, not even to lie down, because the screaming began. I ran as fast as my legs would carry me, and on that big staircase I met the housekeeper, who was yelling. The new son-in-law had been stung by a wasp. The whole house was on its feet. I'm going to stop there. If you want to actually hear the rest of that, you have to read the whole book. And that is coming out next year, next March in English, from Neem Tree Press. So do make sure you all rush out and get that pre-order. Thank you so much for the moment, Doina. It's an absolutely fantastic tale. I can't wait to read the whole thing.